نوشته من حسینه، نوشته کتاب سر، نوشته من حسینه. آخرین بیت. دل من از روز ازل اسیر یک نگاهه، حسین دوست داره مگه خاطر خواهی گناهه. دیوونه حسینم و ویرونه حسینم، خراب و مست گوشه میخونه حسینم، میخونه حسینم. هرچند داری با همه از کرم عباس است، خلقت جنت حق لطف کمه، خلقت جنت حق از شیعه هر گز نهرا زد شد کین دشمن، شیعه هر گز نهرا زد شد کین دشمن. دین ما تحت لوای علم عباس است، دین ما تحت لوای علم ابو فاضل مدد مدد.
خدا را شکر، خدا را شکر، حسین جانم تو را دارم. حسین جانم براہ تو سرو جانم بود حاضر کہ عشق تو بہر منزل، مرا ہمدم مرا ناصر، تو ہی دینا تو ایمانا حسین جانم تو را دارا. لہو بہتا ہے بہنے دو کہ جا جاتی ہے جانے دو، چراغ ظلم گر ظالم جلاتا ہے جلانے دو، بجھائیں گے لہو سے ہم حسین جانا تو را دارا. نغاف کثرت دشمن نبی میں بے کسی درد، ہمیں دانام کے لطف تو در احوالا بود شامل، بعشق خویش نازانم حسین جانم تو را دارا. قسم عباس سوك قسم زينب کی چادر کی نہیں
ما لم يأذن به الله ولولا كلمة الفصل لقضي بينهم وإن الظالمين لهم عذاب أليم صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الشريف. Assalamu alaikum, my very respectable viewers. We discussed one hadith that is commonly used by jurists to prove the validity of taqlid. And that discussion with regard to that hadith has been concluded, and you can make up your mind by watching those lectures. There is another set of ahadith narrations that are used by jurists to prove the validity of taqlid, and this set of ahadith is one of their main proofs for the legality and legitimacy of the institution of taqlid. These are those ahadith which carry a command from the Holy Imam alayhi salam to issue fatwa, or the expression of pleasure and consent in relation to a companion's issuance of a fatwa. In other words, the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam either orders a certain individual to issue fatwa, or a certain person issues fatwa and the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam is pleased with that fact. Now, this has been used by mujtahideen to argue that since fatwa cannot be issued for no purpose, and fatwa may not be issued just in vain, issuance of fatwa only makes sense if that fatwa is used by other people to obey the laws of Islam and to conform and to comply with that fatwa. That would be the only reason fatwa would be issued, and that would be only reason that issuance of fatwa would be beneficial to anyone and make sense. Therefore, taqlid and the practice of taqlid at the time of the holy Imams alayhimus salam can be deduced from these ahadith, because taqlid is nothing else but complying to fatwa, and taqlid is obeying fatwa. Therefore, these set of ahadith prove the legality of taqlid, the legitimacy of taqlid, and the validity of the institution of taqlid. There are not too many ahadith as such. As a matter of fact, although commonly it's the practice of the preachers and promoters of taqlid and jurists to give the impression that there are vast amounts of ahadith as such. There are not too many ahadith as such. There's only one hadith in which the holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam instructs Aban ibn Taqlid to issue fatwa. And there is only one other hadith in which the Imam alayhi salam is pleased by the fact that a certain sahabi is issuing fatwa. So there are not too many ahadith. There are just two hadith, two narrations. But are these narrations valid, and do they prove the point? Let's have a look at this book. This is Misbah al-Usul by Ayatollah Khoui, famous marja. In this book, in the chapter of Taqlid, page number 539, in his discussion to prove Taqlid on the basis of narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, he mentions that Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said to Aban ibn Taghlib, Aban, the son of Taghlib. He was one of the companions of the fifth Imam, Al-Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Al-Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam said to Aban the following. Over here it says Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, but this is actually wrong. This is Al-Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. He said to Aban ibn Taqlid, Ijlis fil masjid, sit in the mosque. Sit in the mosque. In the mosque of Medina, in the mosque of Wafd nas, and give fatwa to people. Give fatwa to people. فَإِنِّي, verily, it is the case that I love an ara fi shi'ati mithlak, that I see in my Shia people like you. People like you. Now, how does it prove taqlid? Because the Imam alayhi salam doesn't say, people, you should follow Aban. People, you should do taqlid. Imam alayhi salam says to Aban, issue fatwa. So this is an indirect argument that because issuance of fatwa makes sense only and could be a sane action only if that fatwa is credible for people, if that fatwa has any benefit for people, and because it would make sense only if people comply with that fatwa. And because Imam alayhi salatu wasalam knows that, we infer that Imam alayhi salam is pleased with people following the verdicts of Aban ibn Taqlid. So Khuy goes, وَمِنَ الظَّاهِرِ, it's apparent, it's evident, أَنَّ جَوَازَ الْإِفْتَاءِ يُلَازِمُ جَوَازَ الْعَمَلِ بِهِ, that Imam alayhi salam, when he says you should give fatwa, it means other people are allowed and permitted to follow those fatwa, and that is taqlid. Therefore, taqlid is proved through this hadith of the Holy Imam alayhi salam. One of the Maraji currently living in Najaf is Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim. This is his book Al-Muhkam fi Usul al-Fiqh, volume number 6, by Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Tabatabai al-Hakim, published in 2013, page number 368, The Proofs of Taqlid. ما تضمن حث أبان ibn Taqlid على الجلوس للفتوى. Imam alayhi salatu wasalam commands and orders and encourages Aban to sit in the masjid in order to issue fatwa. And Imam alayhi salatu wasalam furthermore is happy and pleased that Ma'adh ibn Muslim, another companion, tells Imam alayhi salam that I issue fatwa. Imam alayhi salam is pleased to hear that. Therefore, this credibility that Imam alayhi salatu wasalam is giving to fatwa makes sense only, and it legitimizes, is legitimate only if following those fatwa are legitimate in Islam, and that is taqlid. Therefore, taqlid is proven. So what is the, this is the discussion, this is the argument as would be advanced by mujtahideen, by jurists, by those who see taqlid as a valid practice. Now, what is our answer with this regard? First and foremost, we have to remember that fatwa in the Arabic language today has a specific meaning that we understand from fatwa. But in the times of the holy Imams alayhim salatu wasalam, fatwa had a different meaning. Fatwa had a literal meaning. Fatwa in those times meant to explain, to answer. Today, fatwa means the legal opinion, the legal verdict of a jurist. That is the inference, and that is the conclusion and the consequence of his juristic calculations, his juristic thought. So verdict today, fatwa today has a different meaning. Fatwa is just not any explanation. Fatwa may not be any explanation. Fatwa is the opinion of a jurist. That is fatwa that we understand today. But at the times of the holy Imams alayhim salam, and the literal meaning of fatwa is a different thing. That is simply means to answer, to explain. And this word fatwa has been used in the Noble Quran in many places. And I'm going to show you some of the usages of the term fatwa in the Noble Quran. This is the Noble Quran, translated by Dr. Muhammad Taqiyuddin al-Hilali and Dr. Muhammad Muhsin Khan. Let's go here. Surah As-Safat, verse number 11. فَاسْتَفْتِهِمْ أَهُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا أَمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا. These kafirs are very arrogant. Infidels, those who reject the deity, those who reject the creator, they are extremely arrogant. Ask him, my Habib, ask him, pose this question unto them and inquire from them the following: is their creation stronger? Have they been created with great strength? Or the other creations that we have created? For instance, Allah Ta'ala has created many other beings who are stronger than the human being, mentally or physically. Mentally, perhaps the angels, or perhaps jinn. They're probably smarter than the human beings. And physically, there are many animals who are superior to the human being and their physique. So ask them, my Habib, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who has greater strength in creation? God has created them with greater strength. Them, human beings, the infidels specifically, or God's other creations. Now, remember that Allah says that we created the human being from mud, from sticky mud. So the human being is created from mud, from earth, and there are creations that have been created from light, from fire, such as angels, such as jinn, right? So this is fastaftihim. Fastafti. This is a derivative, a conjugate of the term fatwa. Fatwa. Ask them. Require a fatwa. Ask for a fatwa. Demand a fatwa from them. Fatwa here is used in its literal sense. Demand an answer. Demand an explanation. Not a juristic thought. So, fastaftihim. Here is the translation. Then ask them. That is, these polytheists. Are they stronger as creation, or those others like the heavens and the earth and the mountains whom we have created? Verily, we created them of a sticky clay. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاهُمْ مِنْ طِينٍ لَازِبٍ فَاسْتَفْتِهِمْ أَهُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا أَمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا. So here you see in the Noble Quran, the term fatwa is derivative istaftihim, istifta, has been used in which sense? Not to inquire, not to evoke, not to demand a juristic opinion, rather, in its literal sense, to demand for an explanation, to ask for an answer, to pose a question. Here's another verse in the Noble Quran. فَاسْتَفْتِهِمْ Surah As-Safat. Verse number 149. فَاسْتَفْتِهِمْ أَلِرَبِّكَ الْبَنَاتُ وَلَهُمُ الْبَنُونَ. My messenger, ask them, demand them for an answer, ask them. أَلِرَبِّكَ الْبَنَاتُ, because polytheists, they maintain that angels are, some of them, not all of them, some of the people in Mecca, they were outright atheists. They didn't believe in any God. Some of them maintain that there is a God and angels are his daughters. So angels are females and they are God's daughters. So ask them, are they only daughters for your Lord and sons for them? So sons are good. The Arabs thought and believed that sons are good, sons are beneficial, daughters are not that good. And God has daughters. So why do you say angels are God's daughters? And how do you know they're female? So if God is all powerful and almighty, why would he give you sons and keep daughters who are weaker, who are not desirable for themselves? So this is a question to be posed to those who do not believe in the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Fastaftihim. Again, we are focusing on this usage of this term, fastaftihim, which means ask them. Pose this question, the question unto them. Okay? Let's go to another verse in the Noble Quran. In the chapter of Yusuf alayhi salam, you know the Pharaoh, the Pharaoh at the time of Yusuf alayhi salam in Egypt, he saw a dream. He saw 7 fat cows, very healthy cows, and he saw 7 very weak and thin cows. And those thin cows, they ate up the fat cows. And then he saw 7 very green stalks of wheat, very green and very healthy and very fruitful stalks of wheat. And then he saw 7 very weak and parched out and burnt out stalks of wheat. And he asked for an interpretation for his dream. Nobody could interpret his dream. This is Surah to Yusuf alayhi salam, the chapter of Yusuf, verse number 43. And then the king of Egypt said, Verily, I saw in a dream 7 fat cows, whom 7 lean ones were devouring, and 7 green ears of corn, and 7 others dry. O notables. Now here's the Ya ayyuhal mala. Aftuni, give me fatwa. This is not a demand for a verdict from a jurist. It is not asking for a legal opinion. He is demanding an interpretation. Aftuni, explain to me, answer me. It's the term fatwa. Give me a fatwa. Fatwa has been used in its literal term, in its literal sense, not in the sense that we have today. And nowhere in the Noble Quran, the term fatwa has been used in its literal, in its sense that we use today, that we demand a fatwa from a marja or from a mujtahid, the conclusion of one's ijtihad. So these are all literal meanings of fatwa. Give me a fatwa. Explain. Explain to me. Aftuni. Give me fatwa. Explain to me my dream. If it is that you can interpret dreams. Aftuni fi ru'yai in kuntum lirru'ya ta'burun. And then the people couldn't answer. Nobody could interpret his dream. So the cupbearer, the person who used to carry his wine, he remembered that Yusuf alayhi salam is in prison, in the dungeon, and he knows how to interpret dreams. So they sent someone after Yusuf alayhi salam. They said to him, Yusuf, ayyuha siddiq, Yusuf, you are so truthful. Oh, the truthful one. Aftina. Give us fatwa. Not fatwa in the sense that we understand today. Aftina, give us fatwa, means give us explanation. Explain for us, answer us, interpret this dream for us. That the king saw such a dream. Here is the translation by Dr. Yusuf, by Dr. Taqiyuddin al-Hilali and Muhsin Khan. He said, O Yusuf, the man of truth, truthful Yusuf, explain to us the dream of 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows and 7 green stalks and 7 parched out stalks of wheat or corn. At any rate, so you see at these different places in the Noble Quran that the term fatwa has been used in which sense? In the sense of explaining, giving an answer, and it has nothing to do with ijtihad, and it has nothing to do with the mujtahid and what we are familiar with the term fatwa to mean today. Here's another place in the Noble Quran, Surah An-Naml, the chapter of the ant. Surah An-Naml. So Sulaiman alayhi salam sent a letter to the Queen of Sheba. This is the letter. Innahu min Sulaiman. Verily, it's from Sulaiman. And verily, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Allah ta'alu wa atuni muslimin. Be you not exalted against me, but come to me as Muslims, true believers who submit to Allah with full submission. Qalat. So the Queen of Sheba, she sees this demand, this command, this letter that a famous king, Sulaiman alayhi salam, is demanding that they have to come with great submission to him. So she says what? She is going to ask for some counsel. She is going to ask for advice from her advisors. What did she say? قالت يا أيها الملأ. she said to the notable, to the prominent individuals in her court, in her kingdom, Aftuni fi amri. Aftuni fi amri. Aftuni, give me fatwa. This fatwa again doesn't mean Aftuni fi amri. It doesn't mean fatwa. Give me a fatwa. It means give me an explanation, give me your advice, give me your opinion. Lead me, answer me, what should I do? Because Sulaiman has sent this letter to me. ما كنت قاطعة أمرا حتى تشهدون. She said, O chiefs, advise me. Aftuni, give me fatwa, means aftuni. In this case of mine, I decide no case till you are present with me and give me your opinions. So you understand, in all these places in the Noble Quran, the term fatwa doesn't mean the what we understand from fatwa today, which is the conclusion of a mujtahid, a jurist's ijtihad. Now let's go to the narrations that are used, the two narrations that are used by the mujtahideen, and we are going to discuss their content as well as their chain of narration, whether they're credible. This is the book of Ikhtiyar Ma'rifat al-Rijal, al-Ma'ruf bi-Rijal al-Kashi, published in Qom at the year 1427. My apologies. Let's go to Rijal al-Najashi first. This is the Rijal of Najashi, published in Qom, and here in the biography of Aban ibn Taqlid, that is the narration that you see. So now this narration is on the authority of Baladhari. Baladhari is not Shia. And there is no chain of narration mentioned except Rawan or Aban narrates from Atiyah. So this hadith doesn't have a chain of narration. Therefore, this hadith that Imam alayhi salam told Aban ibn Taghlib to sit in masjid and issue fatwa, according to mujtahid's own, the mujtahideen's own, the jurist's own standards for the credibility of a hadith is not a credible hadith. Therefore, it cannot be used to prove taqlid. Now, setting this argument aside, let's go to the content. Abu Ja'far al-Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam says to Aban, Ijlis fi Masjid al-Madina, sit down, sit in the Masjid of Medina, waft al-Nas, and give fatwa to the people. فَإِنِّي أُحِبُّ أَن يُرَى فِي شِيعَةِ مِثْلُكَ, because I love to see in my Shia individuals like you. Now, is there any clue, any evidence in this hadith or any other hadith that Aban was a mujtahid, a jurist, and the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam here has used the term afti, give fatwa, not in its literal sense that usage was prevalent at that time, but in a technical sense that we use it today, and has this new meaning of fatwa that has been more commonly used for this word today. So we have the term fatwa, and its derivatives have two different meanings. One meaning that is more prevalent and more used today, which is fatwa means the statement, the verdict of a mujtahid, which is the result of its ijtihad. And fatwa also means simple explanation, to answer. Now, is there any clue in this hadith that confirms that that would suit the mujtahideen? That would mean that Imam alayhi salatu wasalam commanded Aban to do ijtihad and deliver his own legal opinions, his verdicts to people. Is there any such evidence? There is no such evidence. And there is nothing in the life of Aban ibn Taghlib that he was a mujtahid. Aban ibn Taghlib was a narrator of a hadith. And there are many narrations narrated by him. But there is nothing in our books that shows that he was a mufti, that he was a jurist, that he used to give verdicts. And there is nothing to give us any clue that Imam alayhi salatu wasalam has used this term in the sense that would suit the mujtahideen's purpose. I hope this is clear to you. And inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, we have many evidence that at the time of the holy Imams alayhim salatu wasalam, fatwa and ifta was done through explanation and narration of ahadith. So if you wanted to teach a person how to pray, and if you wanted to settle a dispute between two people on a question of divorce or a question of marriage or a question of inheritance, this was done through narration of ahadith, application of ahadith, and explanation of ahadith to people. So fatwa at that time, what we have today as fatwa, verdicts of mujtahid, were non-existent among Shia at that time. In those times, what was practiced upon were the ahadith. So when the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam says to Aban, who is a narrator by all accounts, there is no account of him being a mujtahid, was telling him to aftid nas, give fatwa to people. He's not asking him to give fatwa, what we know as fatwa today, the juristic verdicts. What he's asking him to do is teach people our ahadith, deliver our ahadith to them, and answer their questions, and teach them and explain to them. That's what he means. And now, as I will show to you, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, in the second hadith, this will be furthermore explicit for you. كتاب اختيار معرفة الرجال المعروف برجال الكشي, written by Shaykh al-Tusi rahimahullah, published by مؤسسة النشر الإسلامي in Qom at year 1427. Here, page number 217, and the lifetimes of Ma'adh ibn Muslim al-Harra al-Nahwi, another narrator of the holy Imams alayhim as-salam. Ma'adh ibn Muslim al-Nahwi says that I went to al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam asked me, بلغني أنك تقعد في الجامع فتفتي الناس. It has this news has reached me. It has been reported to me. I've heard that you sit in the masjid and you give fatwa to people. Now, give fatwa to people could mean two things. What we understand from the term fatwa today, it means what? A jurist's opinion. So, per this understanding, the Imam alayhi salam is asking Muslim ibn Ma'adh, I heard that you sit in the masjid and you express your legal opinions, juristic opinions, you give fatwa to people. And there is another meaning for fatwa, which means to explain, that you answer. And it doesn't have to be necessarily the juristic verdicts. So which of these two meanings does the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam intend? There's clue, there's evidence in the hadith itself that settles this dispute. So he said, I've heard, this news has reached me that you sit in the masjid and you give fatwa to people. Ma'az says, I said, yes, na'am, yes. وَقَدْ أَرَدْتُ أَنْ أَسْأَلَكَ عَنْ ذَلِكَ قَبْلَ أَنْ أَخْرُجْ. And I wanted to ask you about this before I exit this place, before I get out. I wanted to ask you about this. إِنِّي أَقْعُدُ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ. I go and sit in the masjid. فَيَجِئُ الرَّجُلْ يَسْأَلُنِي عَنِ الشَّيْءِ فَإِذَا عَرَفْتُهُ بِالْخِلَافِ لَكُمْ. I go sit in the masjid, and one person comes to me, and if I know him, that he is not a Shia, when I know this person, he's coming to me and asking me a question, and I know he is not a Shia, so how do I answer? أخبرته بما يقولون. I inform him of whatever their own position, their own denomination says on that subject. So I answer him according to his own belief system, according to his own denomination, because he's not Shia. وَيَجِيءُ الرَّجُلُ أَعْرِفُهُ بِحُبِّكُمْ أَوْ مَوَدَّتِكُمْ. And then a person comes to me and I realize and I know Alhamdulillah. And I recognize that this person is a Shia. This person is a follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam. فَأُخْبِرُهُ بِمَا جَاءَ عَنْكُمْ. Now, this term, أُخْبِرُهُ بِمَا جَاءَ عَنْكُمْ, this is very important. Ikhbar means to narrate. I narrate to him that hadith that has been narrated from you. That hadith that has been quoted from you, that has been related from you, I narrate that hadith to him and inform him that hadith. So here, clear statement by Muslim al-Ma'ath al-Nahwi, that he says, yes, I give fatwa. When a Shia comes to me, I narrate hadith to him. Clear statement that there is no juristic calculations involved here. When a person asks him a question, he does not inform him of his own verdicts. He simply narrates the hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And this was the practice that was commonly prevalent at the time of the holy Imams alayhim as-salam, that teaching of rulings were through narrations of hadith. وَيَجِيءُ الرَّجُلُ لَا أَعْرِفُهُ وَلَا أَدْرِي مَنْ هُوَ. And then a third person comes, and I don't know him. I'm totally perplexed, whether he is Shia or whether he is a non-Shia. لا أعرف. I don't know him at all. In that case, فأقول جاء عن فلان كذا وجاء عن فلان كذا فأدخل قولكم فيما بين ذلك. When such a person comes to me and I don't know whether he is Shia or not, then I tell him, he asks me a question. I say, this narration has been narrated from Omar. This narration has been narrated from Abu Huraira. This narration has been narrated from that person. And then amongst those narrations, I mention your narration. And I say, this narration has been narrated from Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And I make sure that I narrate a number of narrations, and I mention and I include your narration in those narrations. So in that case, if that person is Shia, he would understand what is the position of the holy Imams alayhim as-salam. And if that person is not Shia, then I've maintained taqiyya, I have upheld taqiyya, and I would not be risking my position and my life. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam replied, Isna kada fa inni kada asna. Do this, I do the same thing. So this, what you're doing is correct. I do the same thing. So this hadith is clear here that there is no juristic calculations involved here. Fatwa here simply means answering people's questions, and fatwa has been used in this sense that when a person asks a question, he gives fatwa. He gives fatwa means he narrates a hadith and responds to them, and it doesn't involve ijtihad, and it doesn't, fatwa certainly does not mean a juristic view that we define as fatwa today. There are several acknowledgements and admissions by very respectable and very renowned jurists in this regard. For instance, note this book, نهاية الدراية في شرح الكفاية by Sheikh Muhammad Hussein al-Isfahani, volume number 3, published by Sayyid al-Shuhada Publications in Qum al-Muqaddasa, page number 466. He's talking about those ahadith which prove the validity of fatwa, the validity of taqlid. The validity of taqlid. وَأَمَّا أَخْبَارُ الدَّالَّةِ عَلَى جَوَازِ الْإِفْتَاءِ وَالْإِسْتِفْتَاءِ. Those ahadith which suggest the permissibility of fatwa, issuing fatwa, and permissibility of seeking fatwa. وَإِنْ كَانَتْ أَحْسَنَ مَا فِي الْبَابِ. Although these are our strongest and most tenable ahadith in order to prove taqlid. Although these are the best ahadith we have to prove taqlid. And there are not too many such ahadith, only 2 hadith, as I mentioned. However, إلا أن الإفتاء حيث كان في السطر الأول بنقل الخبر. However, the problem is, at the times of the holy Imams alayhim as-salam, ifta, issuance of fatwa. Issuance of fatwa was carried out by narrating hadith. وكان نشر الأحكام في زمان النبي والإمام عليهما السلام بنقل الخبر أخبار والآثار. And inculcation and propagation and teaching of rulings of Islam at the time of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the times of the various holy Imams alayhim salam, in the first 3 centuries of Islam. At those times, teaching of rulings was done how? بنقل الأخبار والآثار. Akhbar means ahadith. Athar also means hadith. So this teaching of ahkam, teaching of rulings, was carried out, was done through narration of hadith, through articulation of the sayings of the Imams alayhim salam, of the sayings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Therefore, although we have these ahadith about fatwa, give fatwa, or somebody gave fatwa, Imam alayhi salam is pleased with that, they don't support and do not prove the taqlid that we have today, because at that time fatwa was a different thing. Fatwa at that time, at the time of the holy Imams alayhim salam, was narrating hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Therefore, this doesn't prove taqlid, this doesn't prove ijtihad, this doesn't help us at all. So, لا بأعمال الرأي والنظر. Teaching of ahkam, Shaykh Muhammad Hussain al-Isfahani is very clear in this regard. Teaching of ahkam in the times of the holy Imams alayhim salatu wassalam was not through expression of legal and ijtihadi opinions. Teaching of ahkam was not through that, through expressing one's ijtihad, only through narrations and quotations of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. فلذا لا تدل إلا على حجية الخبر. Therefore, since at the times of the holy Imams alayhim salam, fatwa meant what? Explaining hadith to people, delivering hadith to people. Therefore, the hadith that we have about fatwa, they only prove that one should follow hadith, that one should hold hadith dear and learn hadith. That's what only it means. It doesn't prove taqlid. And this is a very important admission by this scholar. And we have similar admissions and acknowledgements by other scholars in great number, inshallah. Some of them you could see in my probably 3rd or 4th speech on this lecture on this subject in English, and probably some of the other ones I'll narrate to you tomorrow, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. Let me go to your questions. So, Al-Mutayri goes, question, is there a difference between Omari and the current Jama'at Mujtahideen, so-called Shia leaders, or is the method of giving fatwa the same for both? Obviously, there are a great difference. The giving fatwa of Omari scholars is not the same. There is difference and there are similarities. They are not totally different. They are not totally identical. There are differences. What's important for us is their opinions, Mujtahideen's opinion. Nobody's opinion has any legal validity that we have to follow, that they have the force of a law in Islam. They do not have the force of law in Islam. No other, only the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the 12 Imams alayhim salam and As-Siddiqa Tahira, the daughter of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. These 14 individuals, they are divine gods, divine guides. They are God's appointed leaders for us. Any action, any word has the force of law. And we are instructed by Allah and the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to follow them, not the Mujtahideen. But with regard to the ijtihad, there is a great amount of similarity between Shia ijtihad and Omari ijtihad. There are differences also. That's a brief way to explain that, and then details would require a lot of details then. Okay. RYU goes, Salam Sheikh, I hope you're well. I feel bad that there isn't a lot of recognition of your lectures in English. I believe you truly are one of the kind. Thank you so much for everything. No problem. But popularity is not my goal here. Please keep doing your service for Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam in the English language. Eventually, you will help many wake up from common misconceptions, inshallah. Okay. Batul goes, Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. May Allah bless you for your hard work. We really do appreciate all the lectures, videos you produce for us. Jazakallah. May Allah lengthen your life to keep serving Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Thank you, sister. May Allah lengthen your life too. Okay. Then, could you possibly give longer titles to your videos on YouTube that explain briefly what you are doing through? Much appreciated. Yeah, you can see that in the explanation, in the description of the videos. Al-Mutari goes, you are a great researcher. I really appreciate you from my heart. Thank you for showing us the soul of the true Shia religion that was covered by the ijtihad of current mujtahids and Maraji. Yes, Sheikh, do you think that all hadith are simple enough for us all to derive meanings from? Do you think it's possible for us to get the wrong meaning? It's possible. It's possible not to understand, of course. That is why it is the role of true scholars to explain a hadith. A person may not understand hadith. A person may misunderstand a hadith. A person may be confused by a hadith. That's possible, totally possible. That is why it's the duty of a scholar, a true scholar who is dedicated to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, to serving Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, to explain the words of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam for common Shia, to write books that explain the words of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam in simple words, so common people are not confused and they are not misled because they didn't understand the hadith well. And there's a question, why do some Usulis mix up the linguistic meaning with the modern meaning? They often do that. That's the problem with our brethren, with Mujtahideen, that they are very, 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 they have difficult times understanding hadith, because hadith has its own language, is different from the word of scholars. The way scholars write is very different from how the Holy Imams alayhim salam spoke to their Shia. That was a different era. The Holy Imams alayhim salam spoke like the people of their times. That was practiced by people in a conversational tone. That was a dialogue between people. And the way scholars write, that is different, very much different. They have their own terminology. They have their own styles, the way they write, the way they use words, the way they structure sentences. So that's very different from a hadith. And because our scholars, they specialize in understanding their own texts, their own theories, and reading each other's books. That's why they never get a chance to understand a hadith well. And that's why they make these very, very embarrassing mistakes, like this mistake here. Hui, who is so respected and so renowned, this very simple thing that fatwa in the times of the Holy Imams alayhim salam meant something else. He does not address that point. He does not address that point. He sees this hadith. Imam alayhi salam says, give fatwa. To Aban ibn Taqlid, give fatwa. He's happy and he's excited that, oh, look, Imam alayhi salam is saying, give fatwa. Therefore, ijtihad was practiced at the times of the Imams alayhim salam. Therefore, if ijtihad was practiced and Imams alayhim salam commanded this person to give fatwa, issue fatwa, therefore people were required to follow his fatwa. Therefore, taqlid is proven from this hadith. However, this is very, very embarrassingly stupid and ignorant of this very renowned scholar to commit such an error. So, unfortunately, the reason for that is because our scholars do not study hadith, and hadith is not taught in our seminaries. So, they make these mistakes. So let's go here. Rafidi goes, Assalamu alaikum. Why does Usuluddin only have 5 pieces? Usuluddin, who said has 5 pieces? This is not a hadith that Usuluddin has 5 pieces. This is categorization of scholars, that the main tenets, the main columns of beliefs are these 5. But you don't have to agree. You say there are 10, there are 20. So these are the main ones. And perhaps that's a good categorization. If you write a book, right, these are different things that we have to believe in all of them. We have to believe in angels. We have to believe and all the things that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have taught us, right? And they're not just 5, there are many. But these are the main ones. This is categorization of scholars. So you don't have to believe in that 5. You could make 10 categories. That's fine. As long as you understand that everything that has been taught by Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, you have to embrace, you have to believe in, and you have to follow. So why Usul al-Din have only 5 pieces points among the Maraji? No, Maraji are not adamant that there are 5. They're not adamant. These are scholars. They, in order to simplify, they have categorized into 5 things. You could categorize them into 10. Okay? And then, when Imam Rida alayhi salam enumerates several peace points in hadith of Al-Fadl ibn Sahl in Tuhaf al-Uqul. There are many ahadith from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam about major tenets of Islam, tenets of Iman. By Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, by Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, there are several ahadith. And sometimes they differ from one another. These are just major points in Aqidah, major points in Islam that one has to have in his life in order to be Muslim. Like prayers, like Sawm, like fasting, like Iman in Hajj, like having faith in Allah's oneness. So these are the main points. Okay? Even ahadith differ from one another. Okay, Batul goes. Sayyid Muhammad goes, if a hadith is narrated and confuses the scholar, how can they explain it without giving their own understanding? If he's confused, he should say that, right? If I read a hadith, and I'm confused, I should not mislead you. I should tell you that I do not understand this hadith. And there are several ahadith as such that their meaning is ambiguous. Their meaning is not very clear to us. So ahadith as such, we should express our ignorance with regard to their meanings. So that would be the role of an honest scholar, to tell you that I do not understand this hadith. And we are not. And a scholar is not expected and required to understand everything. Our knowledge is limited. So if a person doesn't understand a hadith well, then he should express that if he doesn't understand that hadith well. If a person misunderstands a hadith, for instance, I'm a teacher of hadith and I was unfortunate. I thought I know this hadith and I learned it from my teacher and he thought he knew this hadith, but he was mistaken, and so I was mistaken too. And I taught you and you are mistaken too. In that case, we have an excuse before Allah. We have a valid excuse because I truly believe this is what my Imam alayhi salam means. I truly believe this is what I think, right? I have no doubts. But that's not the meaning of hadith. It's possible. All right? That is possible. But in that case, I have an excuse. I have an excuse before Allah because it was an honest mistake. It was an honest mistake that my teacher committed, that I carried on that mistake, and I passed on that wrong information to you. Not on purpose, but because I didn't understand it well. So that is possible, theoretically. If it happens, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, 9 things there are in my ummah that Allah will not hold them responsible for that. One of them is something that they do not know. One of those things that we will not be held accountable for in the Day of Judgment is something we did not honestly know. And there was no way for us to find out our error or ignorance to make up for it. So that we have an excuse for that. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has promised that we will not be held accountable for that. Okay. Then goes but to so Sayyid Muhammad, I explained that to you. Aeropergus goes, when do you return the videos on Nasr al-Haq channel? Is not my channel, okay? Nasr al-Haq is not my channel. It is someone else's channel, but he uses my videos. This person is a good brother, and he recorded all my lectures when I was delivering lectures in Arabic. in Farsi, especially because he's an Arab. He recorded all my lectures from air, from the satellite TV, and he makes different segments. So he puts them on the internet, and he has several channels on YouTube. One of them is Nasr al-Haq. So that's not mine. His was his decision to shut down Nasr al-Haq for a few months. I think he had some social strikes, some strikes from YouTube, and he feared that his channel would be closed down, would be shut down by YouTube because Wahhabis and there are some Shia who made trouble for him. So in order to keep his channel, in order to save his channel, so he made everything private for a few months. So as soon as those strikes are withdrawn against him, probably he'll come back. That's what I think, okay? But I do not control Nasr al-Haq's channel. Batul goes, dear Sheikh, I wish that when we ask question to mujtahids, they give us evidence behind their answers. It would be best for them to actually explain. No, they will not do that. That is not what they're trained for. That they can, even if they wanted to do that, they cannot do that because many of their fatwa don't have any proofs. Many of their fatwa don't have any hadith. Their entire apparatus, their entire framework is founded on this fact that you, Shia, should take their word on its face value and do not question them and do not ask them for evidence. Because if you ask them for evidence on many issues, they express opinions. They do not have any evidence for that from hadith or the sayings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And then most of them are not even familiar with hadith. That's the problem. If you ask them to base their whatever they're teaching according to hadith, they will not be able to because they're ignorant of hadith. They do not specialize in hadith. That is their problem. Said Muhammad goes, an example could be translation of the Quran. It could be. I don't understand your question. The problem is when the Maraji say this is Usul al-Din, you are not allowed to do Taqlid here. This is for Din, you must do Taqlid here. How do the Maraji justify this system? So you ask Maraji, okay? Taqlid is found in Hadith, but you do not find this system in Hadith. Okay, let's go to Facebook. Sayyid Muhammad goes, Allah says in Quran al-Karim in Surah Yunus, if you do not know this, ask those. Okay. Allah makes here the people of the book marja and want that the people of the Prophet ask the people of the book. Oh, that's so embarrassing, Sayyid Muhammad. You are saying that Allah has told us to hold our Jewish brethren, our Christian brethren, they are the people of the book, right? The Christians and the Jewish, as our marja and follow them. That is that is not what Allah says in the Noble Quran. That is not the translation of that hadith ayah, that verse. You are mistranslating. That is not what this verse means. Ahl al-dhikr. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. If you do not know something, ask Ahl al-dhikr, people of dhikr. Dhikr is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. People of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ahl of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam are Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. If you do not know something, ask Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. That is what this verse means. This verse is not making it obligatory for you to ask the Jewish people or the Christian people. Taqlid in Islamic law, the unquestioning acceptance of the legal decisions of another without knowing the basis of those decisions. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Okay, may Allah bless you all. Thank you very much. I don't think there's any other question. Isn't there another hadith? Yeah. Ayub goes, isn't there another hadith which clearly points out that Aban narrated thousands of hadith? Yeah, Aban was a narrator. Aban was a narrator. That was what he was. He was not a jurist. He was not a mujtahid. So that is clear. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد يا علي مدد.
بعشق خویش نازانم حسین جانم تو را دار